Okay, I pushed pushed out the counter.
Excellent.
I think it's displaying the counter now on Restream. You seeing anything there, Enrique?
It's loading.
It's loading?
Yeah, wait.
Good thing I built a counter into it.
Yes. Do you know what? I have.
It says we have eight people viewing, so we're probably broadcasting audio at this point.
Fabulous.
Okay, and we got a comment in from Davin and from Peter. And yes, thanks, Peter. Peter's saying he can hear us. Great. We're going to go live in about 2 minutes, folks. Just want to get some more people live, but do feel free to say hi in the comments and tell us where you're joining from.
I can see the comments here. I can.
Super.
On my one.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we know we're live. I just want to wait for a few more people to join, Steve, before I turn on the video.
Yeah, I think the longer we delay that, the better.
Okay, a little over a minute. Hey, Clay joining us from Atlanta. Good man. And Montreal. Peter, I was in Montreal in January of this year, and it was minus 18. I was bloody frozen.
Seriously?
Yeah. I was there for a decom event.
That's pretty insane. So it is.
Yeah.
It got down to -7 here a couple of days ago.
Oh dear, yeah. Luckily the camera doesn't pan down.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I have a standing desk. It's lovely.
Southern California, Reg is there. Or Ray, I'm not sure. Reg, I hope. Reg, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, do correct me in the comments. Or EJ, I presume that's Reg, but it could be Ray.
Toronto,
nice. Cold, I'm sure, this time of year. Okay, 3 seconds, 2, 1, and we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the rebooted Tech for Good live show with myself, Tom Raftery, and my co-host from old, Chris Kernaghan. We had this show running on YouTube back in, I want to say it was 2014, that kind of ballpark, Chris. We ran it for a good while, but unfortunately the interactivity on YouTube wasn't nearly as good as the interactivity here. So, you know, we did okay for a while, but we never really got the numbers that we already have here. I see someone coming in this LinkedIn user there saying joining from England, but we've already had people from Toronto, from Montreal, from California, from other places. So, yeah, this is great. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll say a few words about myself before we kick into the show proper?
Yeah, so I am a SAP technical consultant working for a global service provider. I've been in the tech ecosystem for about 22 years and been in the SAP ecosystem for about 21 years. I'm an SAP mentor. I've known Tom for, I'm going to be scary, Tom, probably about 10 years now.
At least. Yeah.
I know, at least. And so I'm a big fan of just technology in general. Doesn't matter where it is or what it does. If I can take it apart and play with it, I usually have my hands on it. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Chris. And thanks, Davin. I've turned up the gain a little on the mic. I hope that's a little better now. Hi to South Indiana, to Alejandra. And it's been a surprisingly mild winter in Atlanta, apparently, or in Toronto. I'm getting my guest locations wrong. Sorry about that. Yeah, Tom Raftery. I work for SAP. I joined SAP. I was recruited into SAP in 2016. My title is Futurist and Innovation Evangelist. I'm a global VP, and I have up until recently been doing a lot of keynoting all over the globe. And of course, along came pandemic, and back down here, stuck at home, and it's been interesting. I've had to change very much what I'm doing. Gone from doing keynotes in front of audiences to doing keynotes right here in front of this computer. So we've been Chris and I have been getting together a list of stories for you guys for the show for today. So hopefully you'll find them interesting. They are, although I'm in supply chain, they're not supply chain focused. There's a couple of supply chain ones in there, but there's all kinds of tech for good stories in there going across a number of different areas. So if we start off, we want to talk about, and Clay has just said it's mild in Atlanta there as well, and that brings us nicely to our first topic, which is climate. So thanks, Clay. A nice segue for us there. And there's some good news, fortunately, in the climate arena, because according to this story, which was in the Guardian this week, Thursday the 7th, so last week actually, sorry about that. Last week, global heating could stabilize if net zero emissions are achieved, according to a new report. And this, you hear a lot of these reports, but this report was actually, they were quoting Michael Mann in this report. And if anyone is familiar with climate science, Michael Mann is one of the leading climate scientists, and he was quoted in this report. And basically, we have now over 100 countries who have signed on to getting to net zero by 2050, and China has said that they will do it by 2060. And what this report says is that if countries go to net zero, then the increase in temperatures that we're seeing will slow down and stop. So I think the analogy Michael used in the article was that it's like filling a sink that has a drain that's not quite properly put on, so that as you're adding in water, there's a little bit escaping all the time, and essentially that is the carbon being sucked out of the atmosphere by plants and by oceans and things like that, and that's what's happening right now. And if you stop adding water, in other words, if you stop adding carbon to the atmosphere, then slowly, it'll be pulled back out of the atmosphere, and the heating we're seeing at the moment will slow down and stop. So I thought that was great news, because we've been hearing so long bad news on climate that it's great to have a good news story for a change. Things might not, spiral completely out of control if we play our cards right.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because it makes the point in the article that there are other climate scientists that are concerned that this could reduce the immediacy of the Paris Accord, but ultimately it seems to be moving us down the right path, on the right track. One of the things I find interesting was the way they factored in the dynamicism of the natural systems and trying to bring those carbon sinks into play. Yeah. And how they affect, and that was something that was fascinating as well, because that's really not easy.
Yeah, and I think net zero is nice, and we're going to have to get there, but I think we're going to have to go beyond that and go to carbon negative, so that we're sucking CO2 back out and getting. We're now at about 420 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. We were at 250 back in pre-industrial times, so we've gone from 250 to today at 420. We need to try and get it back down. I doubt we'll get it back down to 250 again, but if we got it down below 400, down below 350, down below 300, we'd be doing much, much, much better.
I feel like I'm discussing my weight here.
Say again?
I said I feel like I'm discussing my weight here. I was 75 kilos when I was 18. I'm never going to see that again, but if I get down to 80, I'll be quite happy.
Indeed. And so I thought this was a cool story as well. This talks about how to incentivize getting to net zero or getting down, and it talks about using carbon taxes. And of course, tax is always a word that is fraught, and people don't generally like talking about taxation. But what they say here is, in fact, if we had a revenue neutral tax, where the money taken in by the tax is distributed back out again in a way that is, as I say, revenue neutral to the government or to the coffers. And there are many ways of doing this, but what they say in the article is if you were to take the tax from the carbon and give it back to people every year in the form of a check, then that would be revenue neutral. In the US, if you had if I remember correctly in the article, they said if you had a tax of $50 per ton of CO2, that would amount to a check of between $1,500 and $2,000 a year per person in the country. Or per taxpayer, I suppose, and that's even better than the stimulus checks they're getting right now. And what that means is things that are carbon intensive would be more expensive, and things that are not carbon intensive would be less expensive by, relatively. And so it would tend to send people towards the less carbon intensive products that they're buying. So I thought that was a really nice way of achieving a carbon tax and pushing people in the right direction.
Yeah, very much, very, very much. It reminds me of the when they started to when they legalized marijuana and they taxed it in Colorado. So they've been running a budget surplus, I think, for 2, maybe 3 years, and because of that, they're actually giving checks back as tax rebates to people. I know they've done it once. I don't know if they've done it again since. But it was one of the things that made it sort of easier to cope with.
I think they do that in cars already, Peter said as well. So interesting. Okay. We'll head into renewables, and there's some great news on renewables there. They said, first of all, renewables produce more power than fossil fuels in Germany for the first time. That was excellent news. There's a few of these. Similarly, in the US, renewable energy sources dominate new electrical generation capacity in the US in 2020. Essentially what that is saying, so the previous one was saying renewables generated more electricity in Germany last year than fossil fuels, which is, it's a landmark. I think renewables came in at around 40% or a little over 40%, if I remember correctly. This article talking about the US is saying that the new electricity generation that was built in 2020 was dominated by renewables. So I think the amount of renewables in the electricity system in the US is still, I want to say, somewhere between 20 and 30%. It's in the article, but I just can't remember. But what's happening is it's catching up because a lot more new renewables are being built out rather than fossil fuels, and that's a lot of that's down to access to funding and investment as well. So Rajesh is saying there, a tax, going back to the previous article, a tax would add cost to production, even if tax collected distributed back to citizens. There's always potential for the spend to be on less carbon friendly products. I'm not sure, Rajesh, because I think if your carbon intensive product is taxed on or has a carbon tax added to it, then it's going to be more expensive than its carbon light alternative. And Davin's saying that would push them to be more carbon conscious on their own, which would increase the buy-in. Exactly. That's precisely the point, Davin.
It's the nudge principle. It's the nudge principle that was pioneered by the Labour government under Tony Blair towards sort of healthy choices and things like that. It's that nudge. So it's not explicit, but it is a nudge. Going back to the renewable energy sources, one of the things that's fascinating, and we've talked about this years ago, is the way the electricity market within the United States is actually made up. Where in a lot of countries, microgeneration and renewables is or microgrids is gaining traction, or it was gaining traction. I think that's probably now being overtaken by large utilities and scale. But it would be interesting to see where those renewables are actually being placed. So they are, because obviously there are states. Florida is horrendous for renewables, even though it gets massive amounts of sunlight.
It is getting better. Yeah, it has been pretty poor, but it is starting to improve, and most of the states are now because they don't really have a choice, and a lot of it is down to economics as well. The economics of building out renewables and the time frame as well. It takes about 2 years to build out a renewable power plant from planning right through to electricity production. For gas, coal, oil, it takes about 6 years, and for nuclear, you're talking who knows? I mean, Hinkley C has been on the drawing board for 15 years now, and we're still looking at another 10 years before it produces any kilowatts. So that's and this was impressive. This is from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration in the US, and they're talking about the plans for building new electrical generation in 2021, so in this year. And if you look at it, you can see the plans show 70% of new generation being built in the US in 2021 is going to be either solar or wind. Solar making 39% and wind making 31%. So,
nice.
That's, and again, it's all down to economics. It's far cheaper to build wind or solar than it is to build gas or anything else. Another thing to take out from that, you see the pie chart there, batteries are 11%. And that's 4 gigawatts. That's more than 4 times the amount of battery storage that was built out in 2020. And that's again down to economics. The batteries are getting cheaper and cheaper to purchase and build out all the time. So it's making a huge difference. And of course, the more batteries you roll out, the more stable your sources like renewables are, because they're variable generators. Let's swap into the comments here for a second, because we're getting a lot of them, and I'm conscious that we're missing them. So let's see if I can bring the comments on stream here. Yeah. So a tax would add to cost of production. We mentioned that already. 2 products, same quality. One is classed as low environmental impact. The other is made up with no regard. If the government slaps a $50 bill onto that second product as a carbon tax, how many times will you pay it before you see your 50? And Peter, we need to get away from throwaway economy. Prices are so cheap now that we simply toss the products out. Yeah, that's true. Again,
I had a toaster and a kettle. Yes, the kettle was I got new ones for Christmas from somebody, and I couldn't do anything with the kettle and the toaster, because obviously we're in COVID and all the rest of it, and I can't take it to a charity shop. And even if I did take it to the charity shop, would they sell it? Because it would need a PAT test. And you just think, oh, no.
Oh,
yeah, I didn't want to get rid of them, but there was nothing else. They were just in the garage.
The shops here, I have to say, have been reasonably good, both in delivery and in take back. If you buy a lot of things online now, very often they ship with the returns with an RMA built in. So you can straight away just take the RMA out, slap it on the box, and send it back, and they take it back if you don't want it. So that makes the purchasing decision straightforward. But on the other hand, should we be buying as much as we do? And if we are buying stuff, we should make sure it's obviously low carbon. So hence the idea of having a carbon tax, to make the things that are more carbon intensive more expensive, and make us think twice about buying them versus things that are low carbon. There's someone there called LinkedIn user. For some reason, their name isn't coming through, but they're saying as long as subsidies are... Oops, they just disappeared. Let's see if I can get that back. As long as subsidies are still given to conventional energy, renewables cannot compete fairly. This is true. So either you need to tax to correct the imbalance, or you need to remove subsidies. Yeah, that's very true. And if I remember correctly, I think Biden said something about doing away with subsidies or reducing subsidies for fossil fuels, because the amount of subsidies fossil fuels get is criminal. It really is. Luke has joined us. Good morning, folks. I've been looking forward to this. Luke, if you're unfamiliar, folks, was my guest on the podcast last Friday. We had a great podcast last Friday on my digital supply chain podcast. If you're unfamiliar with that, Google Digital Supply Chain Podcast or look it up in your podcast application of choice. And Luke was my guest last Friday, and we had a fantastic conversation about digitization and digital transformation and the differences between the two. So what else have we got? People saying hi to each other.
User is Marie Latour.
Say again?
Our LinkedIn user appears to be Marie
Latour. Okay. Okay, you need to change your settings. Fair enough. That's why it's not coming through. Send the electric kettle to the US. There you go, Chris. You've got a taker for that kettle.
I do indeed. Excellent. All I need to do is just get through the border in the Irish Sea and we're grand now to get it to the US.
So that's Marie Latour, Tom. Thanks, Davin. Thanks for letting us know. Good to know. We'll switch back to the news stories again. And I think there's one more on renewables. Yeah, this was fantastic. Tasmania, who are already at 100% of their energy coming, or their electricity coming from renewables. A lot of it comes from hydro. They're now planning on building out lots of wind, lots of wave, and lots of tidal as well. They want to get to 200% renewables. And, you know, for most countries in the world who are planning to get to 100% renewables by 2050 or 2060 or whatever it is, to have a country that's already there and who have a set aim of getting to 200% renewable by 2030, I think that's fantastic. What they want to do, of course, by getting to 200 is they want to become an energy exporter. They want to become a Saudi Arabia of renewables. They're going to have a big interconnect in place, and they're going to send all that excess electricity to the mainland, because Tasmania is an island off the coast of Australia. If you're unfamiliar, send it to Australia, and or use the excess to generate hydrogen, for example, generate what's called green hydrogen. And you can store green hydrogen in the likes of ammonia, for example, stick it in a boat. You can send it as hydrogen itself, but it's very difficult to store and transport hydrogen. It's easier to turn it into ammonia and ship the ammonia, which is far more stable and cost less to ship. So that's their plan. I think that's awesome, and I think more countries should be ambitious like that.
In real ways, it's actually ammonia is a more useful chemical. So
it is, yeah. It is lots of different uses. If we talk about solar, I thought this was incredible. This is the Abu Dhabi Al Dhafra solar PV project, and it's a 2 gigawatt solar plant being built in Abu Dhabi. And to give you context on what that means, 2 gigawatts is the output of 2 nuclear reactors. Now, I know you've got sun going up and down, so it's not a constant 2 gigawatts, but it's a maximum output of 2 gigawatts. And if you think this is happening in Abu Dhabi, where, of course, there is a huge amount of sun, the cost of the energy, the cost of the electricity being generated there, it'll be sold at 1.3 cent per kilowatt hour. Now, for context on that, I was talking to DEWA, who are the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, and they tell me that for them to generate electricity, they generate 95% of their electricity in Dubai from burning gas. And that electricity sells at 9 cent per kilowatt hour. So having the solar come in at 1.3 cent per kilowatt hour is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that's a guaranteed price. The price of gas is very volatile. At the moment, the price of gas is after spiking. It's after going about threefold in the last couple of weeks. So whereas this solar plant, it will be 1.3 cent per kilowatt hour for the next 20 or 25 years, because that's a power purchase agreement with the developers. So completely stable pricing. What are you saying, Chris?
Here's a question. Just before we didn't do tech, just before we stopped Tech for Good, the first, I think, 1 gigawatt solar plant was bought or was sold in the Emirates. And I'm trying to remember for the life of me what the cost was, but I seem to recall it was about 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And that was 3 years ago. We went offline, I think, three years ago. And to see that drop nearly, 600, to see it, that drop is just unreal.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely unreal.
Yeah, no, it's great. and it continues to drop. I mean, that 1.3 is, yes, it's a record. It's the lowest yet. It's unsubsidized. They managed to get it even lower than they expected. They had it coming in around 1.32, and they got it down to 1.3 with some clever financing with the local banks. But it's unsubsidized pricing, which is phenomenal. And it will continue to drop because the price of solar, it conforms very much to what's the name of that? The experience curve, the learning curve. So and economies of scale as well. So it's one of these things. It's a virtuous circle. As the price drops, it becomes more attractive. More people want it. Price drops, more people want it, and so on and so on.
Well, so on that thing, I've been doing a little bit of trading and things like that. And one of the things that's actually very interesting is the indices on trading sites around renewable energy. And when you actually look at it, it is phenomenal. The growth in that is just in those indices is just brilliant. So it's you would be a mug to put your money anywhere else than in those renewable energy stocks.
Yeah, and I have a podcast for the Climate 21 podcast coming up next week with a guy called Paul O'Connor from JP Morgan, and he talks very much about that and how all the money from investment now is going into low carbon because the high carbon stuff is perceived as a high risk. The next story is about the Dogger Bank, which is the large offshore wind farm of the UK, and this is hugely impressive. It's using these huge Haliade X wind turbines from GE, which are 12 megawatts each. So they're putting 300 of them 80 miles off the shore of the UK. So that gives you 3.6 gigawatts of power being generated by these. It's a mind-blowing project. 3.6. That's larger than the Hinkley C nuclear power plant. And again, it's going to be built out in about 3 to 4 years versus Hinkley C, which is still on the drawing books and might never be finished.
Here's the thing: one turn of that blade is enough to power one house for 2 years.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Insane.
And Rajesh is saying in the comments here, there's a 2,000 megawatt plant planned in Karnataka, India as well, an investment of about $2 billion US. There's an actual India story coming up in a second, Rajesh, about this. So we'll come back to you then. But yeah, the idea of getting a 12 megawatt, when you think 5-10 years ago, most wind turbines were 1 to 2 megawatts, and even if they were 2 megawatts, that means this one at 12 means you have 6 times fewer wind turbines to install and maintain. So it makes huge sense, and that's why the cost of offshore wind has come so far down. And the bigger they are like this, the more they generate because they catch higher wind and they turn more constantly. So they've got a higher what's called capacity factor.
I think they're gorgeous. I do like seeing wind turbines up. I got into a bit of a Twitter debate with a guy that want to put some wind turbines up in the Mourns, and he said, it'll spoil the landscape and things like that. And I said, okay, it's the construction is not the prettiest thing in the world, but I would much rather see a wind turbine on a hill doing something useful, and than a lignite coal mine.
Exactly. I think they're quite graceful. They're quite graceful to look at. I thought this story was fantastic. And by the way, folks, if you are interested in these stories, I will be posting a PPT with the links to all these at the end of the show. I'll find somewhere to put it, and I'll send a link in the comments to this post. But today's wind turbine blades could become tomorrow's bridges, and this is a story out of Wired. And they're looking at a project in both CIT and UCC. So CIT is Cork Institute of Technology, and UCC, my alma mater, University College Cork, where they are taking formerly used or discontinued wind turbine blades and using them in a project to initially try and build out pedestrian bridges, use them as part of the structure of pedestrian bridges so they see a second life. But there's a lot, it's a long article, and it goes into a lot of detail about other potential uses for discontinued wind turbines. And I think they said there's going to be about 11,000 discontinued wind turbine blades in Ireland between now and 2025. So, there's plenty. And that's just Ireland, yeah. So there's plenty to do. There's plenty of work to be done in that space. But getting them, there's talk of getting ones that could be reused, making them from materials that are reusable. Or, it's a long, detailed article. If you're interested in it, go down through it. You thought this was a cool article as well, Chris?
I did. Never mind the local connection for yourself and myself, but I thought it was interesting because it is the end-to-end story. It's thinking about, it's starting early and saying, right, we're going to have to dispose of these things. Let's do it in a more in a more environmentally friendly way. We are learning the lessons from oil and plastic. And batteries, when we started for electric cars and things like that, we still haven't got a very good way to recycle those batteries that doesn't kick another hole in the environment. This was one of those stories that just said to me, yes, we've learned those lessons, or we're learning those lessons, and we're doing better.
Actually, the stuff on cars and the batteries in cars, that's a little bit of a myth. The biggest issue with batteries is not to do with the batteries that are in cars. It's to do with the batteries that are in like laptops and phones and smaller devices like that. The batteries that are in cars are far more. They have a second life because they're so big. They can be used as stationary storage for houses and grids and things like that. So there is an economic case for doing that, and there's a lot of companies going after that market.
Yeah.
So Luke is saying there's happy to see innovation-based news coming out of GE, after a tough year. Yeah, and GE has had some really rough years. Most wind investments made sense in countries like India due to CDM. I'm not sure what CDM stands for. Do you know, Chris?
No.
Rajesh, you might clear that up for the dummies here on the stream.
Exactly.
Peter, I agree with the point that they've always lulled you into trance. Yeah, I think they're very majestic to look at, wind turbines. And I know driving, down to somewhere like, I live in Seville, driving down to somewhere like Ronda, I pass, through fields of them, and I think they're fantastic looking at them. I don't want them to lull me into a sleep while I'm driving, but,
Yeah, definitely not.
And Mick Fields, another Irish guy, is talking about the Mourne installation need finessing with conservation and tourism. No doubt. I'm not familiar enough with that. Maybe Chris would know something about that. I've heard, though, that they have a negative impact on the human body. Fact or fiction? Fiction. I heard a particular president mention that they cause cancer, but a lot of what he said, though, could be taken with a large bucket of salt, I think. Davin is saying we created them to try and help the environment. Now we have to figure out how to continue that. Yeah, when the equipment wears out. Exactly. That's exactly the point, Davin. Yeah, it's to Chris's point, circularity. Like I say, if you are interested in that, it's a really good, really in-depth article with lots of detail and potential uses. And Rajesh has come back with CDM standing for Clean Development Mechanism. Okay. Let me go back.
Actually, Davin, to your point, the article goes into another detail in the fact it's not just about when they wear out, it's when they actually, the blades get more efficient and lighter, and they can be supported on the structure, but they actually produce more power. So it's called repowering. And so that's another way that the blades actually get replaced. So a blade, I think, has a 20-year life cycle. That does.
And of course, after the 20 years, the size of the turbines has, completely jumped from the initial 1 to now 12. So what we should be able to do with them is disassemble them, cut them up, and make a new turbine from them.
Yep.
Storage, we talked a little bit about. Grid-scale battery storage is on the rise, and we've seen that. I'll flip through these quite quickly. Origin plans a 700 megawatt big battery in New South Wales Hunter region. And that's impressive because to date, the largest battery operating in Australia, which was initially the largest battery in the world, is the one in the Hornsdale Battery Reserve, the Tesla one. Started off at 100 megawatts. It was so successful, they bumped it up to 150, and now they're looking at this one. Now, what's not obvious from the headline, is this is a 700 megawatt battery with 2,400 megawatt hours of storage. So the 700 refers to the amount of power it's putting out at any point in time. The storage capacity is 2,400 megawatt hours. So it can hold, 3.5 hours of electricity in the battery and put out 700 megawatts for 3.5 hours. So
wow.
Yeah, that's it's huge, absolutely huge. So it can literally hold 700 megawatts for 3.5 hours, thereabouts. So that's phenomenal. And there are plans to make even bigger batteries. So battery storage, again, it's down to economics. The price of batteries keeps dropping. It makes more sense to roll them out. And this is going to help. Oh, another interesting thing about this battery, they're building it on the site of an existing power plant. So they're going to retire the power plant early and put the batteries in its place. It's a fossil fuel power plant. So, of course, the reason for putting it in there is all the grid connections are there and all the infrastructure for transporting the energy is there. So it makes an enormous amount of sense. So it's a really cool project. And there's similar stuff happening in other places as well. Transportation is really being upended at the moment as well. And Rajesh has come back there again. CDM refers to the carbon trading mechanisms under the UNFCCC. a lot of C's there.
There is, yes. I see a C and another C.
You'll have to add the ads in the notes. In fact, Davin, I've already saved. I made this into a PowerPoint file to display here for the live stream, and I'll save it out because I've saved it out already as a PDF with in the notes some of the key points from each story, plus also a link to the original article. So you will be able to, when I do post it, wherever I post it, I got to figure out where to post it next. But wherever I post the PDF, it might be able to go up on LinkedIn through SlideShare or something like that. Anyway, whatever, I'll put it in a comment to this post, and you'll be able to find it there. This story about electric cars rising to 54% of the share of sales in Norway in 2020. That's, Norway has a lot of incentive. Well, what Norway has is disincentives for buying internal combustion engine vehicles. So they have heavy tax on their cars, but no tax if you buy an electric vehicle. And they've had it this way for a while. So in 2020, 54% of all new cars sold were fully electric. Not hybrids, not plug-in hybrids, fully electric. And I think it was the Audis came out top of the sales for the year. And I think
that was number 2, the Model 3.
In December, the sales got up to 89%. It was 89% of new cars sold in December were plug-ins. So they were both they were a combination of plug-in hybrid and fully electric. So it's been that's been phenomenal. Let me check the comments again because I see you grinning away there, Chris. I'm obviously missing something. I imagine you walking through there with your hair standing out. That would only work, Peter, if you had hair. I don't have a lot of hair, so that wouldn't necessarily work for me. Maybe some of the hairs on my arm would stand up on end. Let's try some discussions with Indian tech startups. That'd be cool. Yeah. What else? If you already sold it off, Peter. Okay.
No, the electric cars one is interesting. I think the next story is going to be, because we talked about this earlier, and the fact, before we went on air, is that I've got 3 kids, and so I'm a family of 5, and therefore, going somewhere, I have to have a reasonably sized car because of all the car seats and things like that. I've got a 5 Series estate, but I really, really, really want that to be my last pure internal combustion engine car. And so this article to me is one that I have been and will continue to study very, very closely, because
this is very cool. And again, as I said, folks, the links will be in this when I post it. This article from Wired lists 24 of the, as it says itself, most exciting EVs coming in 2021, and it's everything from Lotuses and Lexuses right through to there's a Fiat Cinquecento, a Fiat 500 in there. There's a Skoda Enyaq in there, and there's kind of everything in between. And they've missed some really good ones as well. They missed the Renault Zoe, for example, which, while it's not on sale in the US, is the best-selling EV in Europe. They missed the Peugeot E208 and the Corsa. They've missed several, so there's lots. The Citroen Ami is not there, although the Citroen E something, or E, what is it? Another. So there's lots of them there.
EC4 is there.
EC4, that's right. And the Volvo. The Volkswagen ID4 is there, the ID3 is not there. So it's only listing 24, but some really good ones in there. The ID4 is one of the ones I was saying to Chris that, coming from an estate might make a good replacement. The e-tron is another one that might fit into that category. So there's lots of them there. Another thing I was saying to Chris is one of the things that would attract me to something like the ID4 now is the fact that Volkswagen they're, as well as selling them, they're offering them on rental as well. And the rental can be anything from like 4 months to 4 years. And they don't have the prices up here in Spain yet for the ID4, but for the ID3, you can get it for €350 a month. Now, that €350 a month includes the cost of driving, I think it's 1,000 kilometers a month. You also get maintenance, you get road tax, you get insurance, you get maintenance, all included. You also get management of fines and management of tolls, so they look after that for you as well. So that makes it very attractive, because cars are now becoming tech devices. And as tech devices, they go out of date a lot more quickly. My last car was a Prius. I bought it in 2008 and I sold it at the end of 2018. I had it 10 and a half years. But the current car I have is a Leaf, and that's already well out of date because it has a range of 250 kilometers, whereas the cars that are on sale today, 2 years later, have ranges of 400 to 500 kilometers, so it's completely changed. Anyway, I'm missing out on a load of comments here.
They're all talking about people's hair and supply chain of hair and things like that. It's genuinely fascinating. So that is, I hadn't realized that there was such a deep supply chain of hair.
Wow.
Well, yeah, for context, we were in discussion this morning with Sarah Barnes-Humphrey about the supply chain of human hair. Inside joke. Oh my goodness, Davin and I were thinking alike now. Mahindra have EV cars as well.
Very good point, Rajesh. Yeah.
Yes. Davin says, when you leave my head, please remember to turn out the lights. I feel that way many, many times myself. Yeah. So,
in fact, folks, one of the reasons I wear a hat is I'm Irish and I'm really pale skinned and I live in the south of Spain. So, I either decided I decided I would either wear a hat or I'd get a parasol, to protect me from the sun. And while I could probably just about pull off the hat, the parasol would be kind of a step too far. So, I'm going with the hat. So there it is.
I have to say, it takes it's easier for me, but it does take effort and commitment to be this pale. So it does. You can't just willy-nilly go out in the sun. It takes effort to be this pale. Commitment.
Let's see what's coming up. Well, it's coming up next. Oh, yes. We've gone on from electric vehicles to autonomous vehicles. And Mobileye are currently testing autonomous vehicles. And I've forgotten where, but somewhere in the article it talks about they're already testing them. It's probably in Israel because that's where they're based. But they're also looking to, early this year, early 2021, they're looking to roll out autonomous pilot programs in Tokyo, Shanghai, Paris, and New York, subject to regulation. So autonomous cars are coming, and they're coming, it'll depend on where, because some places, I imagine it would be quite difficult to run an autonomous vehicle in the city centre in Seville here, given some of the streets we have here. Or I was in Bangalore a couple of years ago, and the traffic there would make it quite challenging for an autonomous vehicle. But places like, Tokyo, Shanghai, Paris, the traffic there is a little more orderly, although the Parisians can be a little challenging as well sometimes.
Yes, yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
The autonomous vehicles are coming. Like all these things, it's not just a question of when; it's a question of where as well.
I have a question from my daughter. So my nephew is 17. He has his car. He's having trouble getting his test because all the test centres are shut. But my daughter did ask an interesting question: the fact that would she learn to drive? Now she's 7, so it's only 10 years, and I would say probably yes. I would have her learn how to drive a manual car, but the reality is that there will probably be an autonomous vehicle very early in her driving life, as it were.
Yeah. A lot of times I was saying that the job of a driving instructor is very slowly being eroded and will not be needed in the not too distant future. I could rock the parasol, according to Davin. Peter disagrees. And Adrian makes a good point. Adrian's saying that he's concerned his cars are literally the new mobile. And that was partly the point I was making. But they'll need to be recycled every few years like a smartphone. And you're absolutely right, Adrian. But here's the thing. One of the things about product as a service, or the outcome economy as it's sometimes called, is that inbuilt obsolescence, which is something that manufacturers built in because it encouraged you to buy a new whatever it was, is going away with product as a service. Because let's stick with cars for a minute. If Volkswagen are renting out the car, they're going to want it to have as long a life with as little maintenance required as possible, because it's their car. If they're renting it out, the ownership stays with them. So now, the way I see cars going in the future, and I've wrote a whole blog post on this called the iPhoneification of automotive. The way I see the car market going in the future is that it all goes towards vehicle as a service, the kind of rental car. And the batteries in these electric cars, currently last about 500,000 kilometers, 600,000 kilometers with very little degradation. They're not like the batteries in our phones and laptops. They go on forever. Nissan reckons that the batteries in their cars last 22 years, which they say is 10 years longer than the actual body is expected to last. So the batteries go on forever. And they're getting better. The testing on the new Tesla batteries, which were announced last September, says they will go for 3.6 million kilometers. So when you get batteries that can go for 3.6 million kilometers, which is 10 times longer than the expected lifetime of the body of the car, then you get a whole new possible model in automotive, where the manufacturer makes the battery, makes the body, rents it out for 3-4 years, takes it back, makes a couple of changes to the body, maybe adds in some new tech, and sends it out again for another 3 or 4 years, where you're getting a nearly new car with just, maybe a touch up on the paint, if there's a couple of scratches, maybe some new Bluetooth 5.0 or 6.0 or 7.0 or whatever it's gotten to, or the latest version of CarPlay or whatever it is, sent back out after, it was 4 years old when it came in, it's touched up, it's sent back out as nearly new and rented out for another 3-4 years. And the battery has only done, let's say it's done 100,000 kilometers. That's nothing for a battery that can go 3.6 million kilometers. So there's a whole new model possible, I think, in cars. And if you're sending it out nearly new after the 4 years, you're sending it out nearly new with, maybe 5 to 10% of the parts of creating a new car, which is a massive sustainability win. So
absolutely,
I suspect that's the way cars will, or the automotive industry will go over time. Let's see. Dion says, and Germany. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Rajesh says, Bangalore. I agree. Cool. It was challenging. And the horns going there the whole time as all of the traffic is going by. It's really mad. Mobilize Detroit. That's correct, Davin. It's Detroit. That's where it was. Yeah. There was a D in my head, and I couldn't remember what city it was. Detroit, Jerusalem, and Munich.
I couldn't find the thing. I was looking.
Larger EVs that can be used for public transport. That's a good point, Rajesh. In fact, because EVs are much cheaper to operate in terms of fuel, in other words, electricity, and much cheaper to operate in terms of maintenance. They cost less than half the amount of an internal combustion engine. Fleets of vehicles like buses and delivery vehicles are going to flip to electric even faster than personal cars, because if you're a fleet manager, the two big costs you have are maintenance and fuel, and if you can get them down, you'll switch straight away. So buses, deliveries, trucks, all those kind of things are going to switch very quickly. Adrian saying, I love cars, but feel my 2-year-old and 7-year-old will be getting around London in an electric driverless car. Yes, absolutely. And no chance of charging a car in my street. Actually, I'm not sure on that, Adrian, because I understand the point about the street, but a lot of street furniture now is being converted, or not converted, being retrofitted with charging infrastructure. So Ubiquity, is that the name of the company who's working with Philips and several of the boroughs of London to fit street lights with chargers for cars. And there's a couple of other ones that are building the chargers underground with a little kind of button you press and it pops up out of the street to help you charge your car. So there's a lot of solutions happening in that space there, Adrian. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. It's still early days, but
there's an economic thing there. It's people, where there are economics where people can make money either over the long term ability or short term with a massive gain. Somebody's going to step into that market. So they are absolutely.
Peter loves that thinking. I plug and play bodywork. Yes, yeah, exactly. Kind of swapping the top, keeping the battery and just swapping the top. Maybe swapping the tires as well. Yeah. So not only this, but every company is looking for opportunities in its product to either become a service-based. Yes, exactly. That's right. The whole outcome economy is where things are headed. That's a big part of it. Upgrades are the way forward, but feel all releasing sounds exciting. Exactly, yeah. Rajesh, you should look at the life cycle analysis for EVs as well. They necessarily don't compare well with traditional cars. Incorrect, Rajesh. They compare extremely well, and I can point you at a few sources for that. There's a lot of debunking, or there's a lot of scary stories being put out by companies like Bosch, unfortunately, and a lot of the fossil fuel companies are funding a lot of this FUD. In fact, I think the Climate 21 episode I'm publishing tomorrow is with Auke Hoekstra, and we talk very much about a lot of the debunking he does of those FUD stories that are financed, like I say, by the fossil fuel companies and a lot of the automotive companies who don't want the change to happen really fast because they're seeing a drop in their revenue. So Rajesh, keep an eye out for that Climate 21 podcast dropping at 6 a.m. CET tomorrow at the Climate 21 podcast. Auke Hoekstra is a researcher from the Technical University in Eindhoven. He leads a group of 35 PhDs who research this kind of stuff all the time, and they do a lot of debunking of those stories. So I understand there's a lot of studies being put out by, like I say, financed by people who have skin in the game. Yeah. Do you feel Tesla, Google, and Amazon, Uber will take over from Adrian? I think, Adrian, that's a good question. I certainly see a large part for Google. They own Waymo, for example, and the ambitions that Waymo have in this space are breathtaking. And they've already demonstrated a lot of the technology to do that. So Google definitely will be a big player. If you think back 12 years ago, Google launched Android, and see what that did to the handset sector, and then kind of think forward 10 years and, right there you can see what their plans are for the transportation sector. And it's not just for cars, it's for everything that moves, they say it themselves. Tesla will also have a huge part to play. I think a lot of the traditional automotive manufacturers are in big trouble. I think one of the few that will survive will be Volkswagen, because they are embracing electrification. A lot of the others are just pretending to, and I think
BMW, for example. Yeah. I think I'm extremely. They had a great, they had the i3 and the i8. They had a great actual electric car division that they then. They allowed it to implode. I don't know the full politics and stuff behind it, but their strategy,
their strategy, Chris, so far has been, apart from the i3, or their stated strategy has been, let's take an internal combustion engine car and stick a battery underneath it instead of rather than designing specifically for electric. It's a compromise which can never win. Rajesh, I'd like to go through those articles, no problem. Look up Auke Hoekstra on Twitter. It's AUKE, Auke Hoekstra. Send me a link if you can't find. Send me a PM on LinkedIn, Rajesh, if you can't find him, and I'll point you to him. His pinned tweet on his Twitter account is perfect for this kind of stuff. It goes through a lot of the research, for example, that debunks a lot of this kind of stuff. Let's see. Okay. Sai is just jumping on board there. Davin, eventually Adrian Gottsell, Demolition Man, and the franchise wars coming soon. Taco Bell.
or Pizza Hut in Europe, and that has never ceased to annoy me. So it has, Tom, if you don't know, in Demolition Man, they use Taco Bell, but in Europe they used Pizza Hut for a particular restaurant brand who won the franchise wars. Okay. So all restaurants are now Taco Bell or Pizza Hut. So they are in the movie Demolition Man.
Fair enough. Yeah. And Sai is asking, what broadcasting tool am I using? I'm using a combination, Sai. I'm using Restream to stream to LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So that's multi-streaming. And then I'm using Ecamm as my camera operator tool to allow me to switch between screens like I'm doing right now, between the news stories and the comments. Wi-Fi is going to 6. We're running really low on time, Chris, if we're sticking to an hour, so I'll
yeah, we are.
So the version 6 Wi-Fi 6E, the Wi-Fi Alliance has started certifying devices in Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6, if you're unaware, Wi-Fi 6 is the latest version of Wi-Fi. It's faster, it's less contention because there are fewer devices that have Wi-Fi 6 on it. So it's got better security. It's got WPA3, and you can only use WPA3 on it, which is more secure. So it's got a lot more bands and channels as well. So it's going to be awesome. It's the next big thing when it comes to Wi-Fi, and because the Wi-Fi Alliance have certified it now, they will start certifying devices against it. So we've got a standard.
Actually, at CES 2021, the devices already started to come out. So
that's right.
I was reading a review today of the new Netgear one. They're expensive though. It's what were they? The new Netgear Nighthawk, the top one that they have is about $600.
Mm. So, holy crap! I think I'll wait till it becomes a little more standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Sai saying, and it's mesh. I didn't say that in the article. That's cool. Good to know. Thanks, Sai. This article, this is great. The Let's Get Off Friggin' Cows. This is from Patrick Brown, I think is the guy's name. He's the founder and CEO of Impossible Foods. And, it talks about how, if I remember correctly from the article, something like, is it 70% of all mammals on the planet now are either humans or animals that are to feed humans. It's something ridiculous and crazy. And the picture you have there in that article is a picture of a feedlot in Colorado, where there's something like 98,000 cattle just waiting to be, fed and slaughtered so that we can have our Big Mac or whatever it is. It's completely, it's the definition of unsustainable. Breeding animals to slaughter and eat, and Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat and lots of these other companies are. They're set up to change how we generate protein to eat, and it's something that we're going to have to embrace, because we can't go on doing something like that picture there, making these massive lots. It's destroying the environment. It's destroying biodiversity. If we use the likes of Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat to generate the meat that we eat, then we can return that land to biodiversity and reforestation. And of course that will, the diversity is good for the environment, obviously, but the reforestation means we can start sucking back out of the atmosphere a lot of the CO2 that we're pumping into it. So that's a big win for everyone, I think. And the
cows as well. The cattle contribute to greenhouse gases. Famously, the cow burps and burps and things like that are a measurable source of greenhouse gases.
Correct. We're coming up towards the end. Industry 4.0 is becoming even more valuable after the pandemic. This is a story about how during the pandemic a lot of Industry 4.0 technologies were rolled out, and projects were accelerated to meet the kinds of challenges that companies were coming up against. Even things like making sure that putting IoT devices on workers to make sure that they maintained a 2-meter distance, or logging, so that if someone came down with the pandemic, you'd be able to see who had been within their vicinity, a lot of things like that. So a lot of these technologies, which have been developed for a while, but the rollout of them might have been on the back burner because it was low priority, suddenly became high priority. And that means when the pandemic does pass over, companies will be a lot more automated than they had might necessarily have planned to be, and that's going to be hugely valuable to them after the pandemic. And then the last story.
Yay! not the last story, but what the story actually is. That I think more about that.
Yeah. So this is I don't want to get political on this, because my feelings on this would be quite strong, so I'll put them aside for a second. And if we talk about just the fact that he has been deplatformed, I would say not before time. I would say about 5 years too late, but that's another story. What this means, I mean, this has huge long-term implications, and I think we're going to start to see countries and areas, countries like the US, areas like the EU and the UK, roll out legislation, because even the likes of Zuckerberg has been saying publicly for quite a while he would welcome regulation in this kind of space, because what Twitter were doing, and not just Twitter, but the stories about Twitter, so let's stick with that. What Twitter were doing were they were giving him special status by virtue of the fact that he was the president, and allowing him to say whatever he wanted to say, essentially, until he pushed it so far that eventually they shut him off. And not coincidentally, that happened after the Democrats won the Senate. So I think, I think this is going to have long-term implications for social media and for regulation around the use of social media.
Yeah, it's and I think you've hit it there. The social media companies have struggled with both the policies and the content, and the thing about it is that regulation is effectively the least of what you could do, as in, the least you have to comply with. So if they legislate and say you have to not allow any of this content on your platform, then that's fine. They will literally just stop any of that content, and make it in that way. And therefore they're able to pass the buck to the legislators and say, not our fault. This is what we're told to do.
Yeah.
And because they have made a Faustian pact with, my Laura and I laugh about this. We you have all these conspiracy theories about all this advanced technology and things like this here. We can't even manage messaging platforms to be nice to each other. Is it any wonder that people sit and think that there's all these advanced technologies that are being denied to us, and we can't even be polite to each other in messaging?
Yeah.
So it's one of those ones. So yeah, I think there does need to be something, and the tech companies that find themselves woefully unprepared and in a difficult situation that there just was never any way out of. Yeah. So they've done what any sensible person would do, and say, if you want to tell us what we can do, then tell us what we're supposed to do, and we will do that. What is it? Malicious compliance.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so,
okay, we've run a few minutes over time, so I think we'll call it a day with that. But I think we're due this. So thanks everyone for stopping by and listening and participating. It was great to have an interested and engaged audience, and we shall, let's see, throw up the final screen there and say we will see you back here again same time next week. Throw what's going at the end there. Cheerio. Bye-bye.